Imagine you are a military commander standing at the edge of the Jordan River. Behind you, an entire nation. Ahead of you, one of the most fortified cities in the ancient world. A city that had been continuously inhabited for thousands of years, ringed by massive stone walls, defended by experienced soldiers who had no intention of surrendering. And here is the thing that makes this moment so remarkable. You have no siege towers, no battering rams, no armored chariots, no specialized equipment whatsoever for breaking through fortified positions. By every conventional military calculation available at that time, what you are about to attempt should be impossible. And yet, this is where the story gets genuinely fascinating. The strategy that would bring those walls down was not invented in a war council tent. It was not borrowed from Egyptian or Canaanite military doctrine. It came from a completely different kind of intelligence. As we read in Joshua chapter 1, God told this commander directly, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." That commander was Joshua. And what the biblical narrative describes at Jericho was not a conventional military operation. From a military perspective, it may be one of the most intriguing examples of psychological elements ever recorded in an ancient siege narrative. Carried out by a people who, according to the text, understood something most armies of their era consistently overlooked: that a defender's greatest vulnerability is not the wall itself. It is the will of the soldiers standing on top of it. Before the narrative suggests Joshua could even consider how to take Jericho, he needed to understand what he was actually facing. And this is where the intelligence operation began, quietly, without fanfare, long before a single Israelite soldier crossed the Jordan. As we read in Joshua chapter 2, Joshua sent 2 scouts into the city with a specific mission: observe the terrain, assess the defenses, and most critically, read the psychological state of the population. Those scouts made contact with a woman named Rahab, who ran a lodging house positioned significantly on the city wall itself. A lodging house along a major ancient trade route was, in the ancient world, among the most reliable sources of real-time local intelligence available. Travelers talked, merchants shared news, and Rahab, who had been listening for years, told the scouts something the biblical narrative presents as strategically decisive. "Our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you." That is Joshua 2, verses 10 and 11. According to the text, the morale inside Jericho had already fractured. The biblical account suggests this information changed the entire calculation. Joshua now had reason to believe that Jericho's walls were its psychological armor as much as its physical defense, and that armor was already cracking from the inside. Now, here is where the tactical picture becomes layered in a way that rewards careful attention. Jericho's defensive architecture was formidable by the standards of the late Bronze Age. The city sat in an oasis fed by a powerful spring, making it largely self-sufficient during a prolonged siege. Its walls, though archaeologists have debated their exact condition at this period, and no universally accepted reconstruction exists, represented serious defensive engineering by the standards of Canaan at the time. The defenders inside those walls would likely have been equipped with the standard military technology of a Canaanite city-state: composite bows capable of significant range and penetrating power, bronze-tipped spears and short swords for close combat, and the natural advantage of elevated positioning. Archers stationed on top of the walls could suppress any attacking force crossing open ground below. For the Israelites, who according to the biblical record excelled in speed, knowledge of terrain, and asymmetric tactics, but had no established experience in siege warfare, a direct frontal assault on those walls would have carried enormous risk. The narrative suggests Joshua recognized this challenge clearly. The text indicates the Israelites consistently avoided open-field confrontations precisely because they could not match the concentrated firepower and fortified positions of Canaanite forces. So, the biblical account records that Joshua did not attempt a direct assault, but waited for a different kind of instruction entirely. The instruction recorded in Joshua chapter 6, verses 2 through 5, is this: "March around the city once per day for 6 consecutive days, with 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horn trumpets before the Ark of the Covenant, and in complete silence from the fighting force. On the 7th day, march around 7 times, and then, on signal, let the army shout." Read that sequence again carefully, because buried inside it is a principle that many military historians have noted bears resemblance to psychological conditioning tactics: the idea that repeated, non-threatening exposure to a threat can gradually erode a defender's sustained alertness. For 6 days, the soldiers of Jericho would have watched a disciplined, armed procession circle their walls, and then nothing. No assault. No escalade. No battering of the gates. Just the sound of ram's horns and the rhythm of marching feet. On day 1, every defender would likely have been at maximum readiness. By day 4, by day 5, their prolonged vigilance may have become increasingly difficult to sustain. The procession had become expected, predictable, almost routine. From a military analysis perspective, this is where the sequence becomes particularly worth examining. The moment a perceived threat is normalized is often the moment a defender's concentration begins to drift. This is not a claim the biblical text makes explicitly, but military analysts have observed that the pattern described in Joshua chapter 6 shares structural similarities with documented tactics of false normalization used to precede a surprise strike. Whether that parallel is coincidence or reflects a deeper strategic intelligence embedded in the narrative is a question the text itself leaves open. Then came the 7th day. The procession began as before, expected, familiar, almost ceremonial. But this time, the army circled not once, but 7 times. Joshua gave the signal. The priests blew a sustained blast on the trumpets, and the entire Israelite force, in unison, raised a battle cry. As we read in Joshua chapter 6, verse 20, "When the trumpets sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city." The biblical text records that the walls came down. Scholars have offered a range of explanations for the structural collapse. Seismic activity in the Jordan Valley, which is geologically active and had already produced a significant event that, according to the text, aided the crossing of the Jordan itself. The compromised condition of walls that may have been hastily repaired rather than fully rebuilt, or other environmental factors. None of these explanations has been universally accepted, and the archaeological evidence from Jericho for this specific period remains limited and contested. What the military reading of the narrative adds is this: even granting a structural vulnerability in the walls, the biblical account describes an army in perfect coordinated readiness to exploit that opening the instant it appeared. The text says each man charged straight in, not toward a common breach, but each toward the position directly in front of him. That detail, if taken at face value, is consistent with a force that had spent 7 days learning exactly where to go. Why does the biblical narrative present Joshua as the victor? The answer the text gives is not complicated, but it is also not superficial. According to Joshua chapter 1, verse 7, the condition of the promise was precise. "Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. The biblical text presents Joshua's victory as the direct result of complete and precise obedience, not partial compliance, not a modified version of the instruction, but the full sequence followed exactly as given, including the 6 days that produced no visible military result. From a biblical standpoint, that discipline was not incidental to the outcome. It was the condition of it. And that is what continues to make this account worth examining. Not just the outcome, but the kind of trust that the narrative says produced it. The walls of Jericho, according to the biblical record, did not fall because of superior weapons or overwhelming numbers. They fell because one commander, leading one people, followed an instruction all the way through to the 7th day. If you want to keep exploring how the ancient battles of the Bible reveal layers of military, historical, and spiritual intelligence that still reward careful reading, stay with this channel, because Jericho was only the beginning. If this kind of analysis is what you've been looking for, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next battle.